Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. It is 9 a.m. Pacific on Wednesday the 3rd. Um, it's 11 a.m. Pacific where I am right now. You'll notice a difference in my background. Um, and that is because last week I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. What? Actually, I moved to Franklin, which is a little suburb of Nashville. But I drove across the country with my daughter, um, and uh, and my ex-husband, and a dear friend of ours who flew in from Canada to um, to help us to make the drive with us. So it was such a crazy, crazy trip. I mean, the trip itself was fantastic, and we could not have been more, uh, you know, uh, well, the only word that really comes to mind is blessed. um, I mean, we just had smooth sailing, and even though we had one day of really bad winds driving through the plains of Oklahoma, and then the next day driving through Arkansas, we had torrential rain, and so those 2 days were kind of challenging. But the truth is, it was a really great drive, and we saw several states in this beautiful country of ours, and it was really a fantastic and contemplative trip. And so I stayed in a hotel for 5 days, um, while the current tenant at the place where I am got caught up on her moving because about a month ago she got COVID, and so it delayed my moving in. It couldn't delay the trip, right? So uh, so I ended up moving all of my stuff into her garage, and staying in a hotel for 5 days. And so last night, even though, let's see, I got here Thursday, the 28th. Last night was my first night in my new place. So the internet here is screaming fast, which I'm super excited about. Um, so anyway, I won't bore you with too many of the details, but it was quite a trip, and it's quite a change. And you know what? Just as testament to you can live anywhere and work, I have a booking today at 2:30 Central, um, for a job that I have done, and they normally I would go into a studio in LA, and they're like, no problem, we'll book a studio for Kay in Nashville. So I'm driving into Nashville, um, and have work. Um, I was told repeatedly by several of my friends in the midst of the insanity of moving and packing and getting everything done and trying to keep up with all my responsibilities, and the thought that I was like, every once in a while I would sort of wake up like, what are you doing, you insane person? Why? And my friends just kept saying to me, you're very brave, and you're trusting that things are going to work, and that you have a dream of kind of a new life, and so do what you say, trust and be brave. So I do feel like when it's a realization for me that when you're in the midst of change and you're in the midst of the action of doing things, you don't feel brave, and you have so much doubt, and it's only kind of when you look back and you go, oh, I did that. And I felt continually on the trip like I was a bit of a pioneer, um, with a lot more amenities, though, like a car. And I didn't have to have. I wasn't forging the trail. The road was already paved for me, and I didn't have to. I didn't have horses and a covered wagon. I had a nice car. So nonetheless, it felt very much of that spirit, like I was sort of blazing, and I am sort of blazing a new trail for myself. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you and tell you why I have kind of a different background here, and I'm still getting settled. Still seriously getting settled. Anyway, good morning. Let me see. Here you are already making comments, which I so appreciate. Oh, and look, they won't let me see you. Why won't I see you? I see Valentina. Good morning. And I see Yvonne. Um, so this morning, Thank you for joining me, by the way. So this morning, we're going to talk a little bit about agents. I've addressed this once before, but you know what? So many things bear repeating. Um, so, hey, Brad, hi. So we're going to talk a little bit about agent relationships today, right? And how to talk to them, and how to work with them, and how to get what you need. Um, now, the first thing I want to say is I know that it, because I've experienced this myself, truly, throughout my career. Um, Agents seem like gods to us, like they are the purveyors of opportunity, right? And that they know best, and that they know everything. Um, it very much seems that way, and so because they sort of to us kind of sit on high, you know, um, it can be daunting, and you can feel very small, and very much like you're not the one at the reins, right? And so I just first want to acknowledge that feeling, that it feels like they're the ones who have kind of all the power, if you will. And I don't say that pejoratively, right? But it just feels like, gosh, they know so much and I know so little, and I'm new, and and the problem here is that there are pieces of what I just said that are true. Like it's very, very likely they do know more about the business, than you do, than I do. They certainly know what they know, and they know different things than we know, right? So, and generally speaking, they've got experience that we don't have. They are sort of the business end of this relationship that we have. We're kind of the creative end, if you will. And they're kind of the business end. They do the rate negotiation for you. They do all of those things that more kind of entrepreneurial voice actors who don't have agents learn to do for themselves. And so I do want to just acknowledge that sense of like, oh, a feeling smaller, around them. So I've spent many years being afraid of agents, really great agents who had my best interest at heart, and I spent a lot of time not talking to them, which I regret. You know, I I left agents um, before speaking with them about what I wanted, right? Because I was too afraid to talk to them, and too afraid to say, here's where things aren't working for me and I'd like to improve them. And so that's where I sort of learned the hard way, that I have left agents who, again, who believed in me, who, if I only would have let them, really, they really were team players, but I wasn't a team player. I didn't know how to speak to them. Um, and I didn't know, I didn't trust my own talent. That's true. That's very, very true. And so how can you ask for something if you don't believe that you deserve it, or that you don't believe you can follow through on? That's um, so kind of at the core of that is, do you know what it is that you want to do? Do you know what you're, do you have the talent to kind of back that up? Do you have the potential to back that up? You may not be, you know, um, fully realized as an animation actor, but do you have the potential to be? Those are things you have to know about yourself, right? Before you can enter into a conversation, into the relationship with your agents. It's very much like every other relationship, right? Do you know who you are? Do you know what you want? Do you know what you're willing to give? Right? Do you know your boundaries? Do you know where you're open? Right? Same stuff applies with agents, because agents are people too. um, so, um, so I think the first, well, let's say the second thing to note is that um, you're working with your agents, you employ them. You pay them a commission, right? Whether it's 10% or 20%, depending if you're with a non-union agency. So guess what? That means that 80, 90% of the responsibility of your career falls to you, not to your agents, which is why it's imperative to learn to speak with them and communicate with them and work with them as a team, right? So I've had experience with a lot of people who I hear complain about their agents, and they say, um, you know, my agents didn't do this for me, or they didn't do that for me, or they're not doing this, and they're not, right, all kinds of, and I think, well, what are you doing? What are you doing for your career? Um, what are you doing to communicate with them what it is that you want, right? So, so whenever you are approaching an agent, let's say, and I'm a big fan of email. That could be a big piece of my being an introvert. I don't like to get on the phone, but I feel like email is a means of communication where agents can respond when they have time. You don't know what you're interrupting when you call. They may put you through to voicemail, that kind of thing. But I'm a big fan of communicating by email, and then you also have a chain of communication. You've got it right there, right? So when you're speaking to agents, you want to talk to them like they're a part of your team. And so, just for example, um, before I ever started doing animation, I sent a note to Heather Dame at Atlas, and I said, "Hey, I'm really interested in doing animation." And I said, I know it's not an area, a genre that I've worked in before, but I'd really like to give it a try. And the same with video games. And I'm wondering if you would send me copy if I could read on it. And then, if you have suggestions as to who I might study with or take a workshop with, I am all ears, and I would love to know who you think are really the great teachers around LA these days, because I will absolutely get myself into those classes, right? And so, right, like, so that is me saying what I want, right? But also saying, I know you know more than I do, and and I I would love to avail myself of your expertise. And so Heather wrote back and said, "Yeah, that's great. Be happy to send you a copy. And here are the people." She was like, "You're a good actor, so just a workshop here or there, that kind of thing." And I was like, "Well, I don't know how good of an actor I am. I have my own self doubt, right?" So anyway, it really is a matter of approaching them like, you and I, my dear agent, you and I, uh, like, perhaps you're not getting enough copy. Let's say that, right? Okay, so it's a matter of approaching it like, you and I have a problem to solve. So how shall we solve it together? And I'm a big fan also of approaching agents with humility, right? Instead of saying, you never send me copy, and I'm not happy with the copy that you send me, which I can't tell you how many people speak to their agents that way. You're not doing enough, right? Why am I not getting this? Why am I not getting that? Right? Do you know how many people agents have on their rosters? Can you imagine hearing that from 200 people? I don't know that I'd want to be an agent, right? But why don't you be the person who says, hey, how are you? How's everything with your life? I hope things are going well. I wanted to talk to you about the copy that I'm getting. I would love to receive more commercial copy. And I think that I would be good in these particular, micro genres in commercials. And I'm wondering if you and I can talk about that, because I really would love to do more. And I'm taking a class, blah, 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 right? It's like showing your initiative, right? And expressing what you want without blaming, right? Without blaming your agent. I could have said, I could have said to Heather, you never send me animation copy. Why don't you send me animation copy? And Heather might have been like, you didn't tell me you were interested in reading animation copy. Why would I send you copy that, you know? So, um, so again, it's remembering to it's remembering to approach your agents like they are your partners, right? And that whatever issue you are having is a problem that both of you together can solve, right? Um, and so, really, that's generally how we talk to them, right? And even though I say your agents work for you, um, it's really critical that you are a benevolent boss, if you will, right? Um, who wants to work for a cranky boss who blames other people for the state of their business? Nobody. um, so if you can think relationally, always be kind, always think in terms of problem solving. Okay, so I have an example for you that has nothing to do with voiceover, but it just happened to me and having to do with my move. And it was like, this is a really important mindset. Okay, so when I was planning this move to Franklin, Tennessee, and I have my lease. My lease was signed, that I was to take occupancy on the 29th. I got the call 2.5, 3 weeks, 3 weeks before we were to arrive, um, that the current tenant had COVID and that she's delaying. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to figure that out, right? Um, so I booked a hotel. Um, I booked rental. I booked a storage space, right? And then I had a thought. Why don't I ask if I can actually store my stuff in the garage at the property? And that way, I don't have to rent, a storage space, and I don't have to get another truck. I'm still going to have to get a couple movers to come out and help me, but that takes away two pieces of the expense. So landlord came back and said, yep, that's fine. So we roll into town on the 28th, stay overnight at a hotel, pull the truck up Friday morning as planned to unload into the garage. And I opened up the garage and it was full of the current tenant's stuff. So what do I do with that, right? Um, I sent a text to the tenant and I said, good morning. um, just about to unload, but there are boxes of all kinds in the garage and I don't know if you're keeping them or what the circumstance is. So if you could get back to me, I'd appreciate it because I do need to unload the truck as per our agreement. And so she wrote me back and she said, oh, I am so sorry. I guess I should have emptied the garage before you arrived. And I was thinking to myself, you think? So anyway, she said, I'll be right over, because right. And so she came over. And while she was on her way, I was talking to the two people helping me. And I said, okay, we have a problem to solve here. Now, both of them were sort of like, how could the tenant not do that? That's not very thoughtful. What's wrong with her? All the complaints start about the current tenant, right? And I said, okay, we have to stop that because we have a problem to solve. We have to get what's on the truck into this garage. So how are we going to do that? And so I said, I think we have two options. I said, one is to move all her boxes into the house if she needs those boxes to pack. We do that for her. Or the other thing is, if we get in the house and there's space in the living room, we ask if we can just unload into the living room. So in fact, the second thing is what we did. The living room was totally open. It was like, we're just going to unload there, right? So I could have complained. I could have called the landlord, right? Um, I could have blamed, right? I could have been impatient, rude. I could have brought out the lease and said, I have possession on the 29th. Get your crap out of here. I could have done that, but it would not have solved the problem, right? Um, so in the end, we moved everything into the living room. And then later that day, I sent her a note, the landlord, and I said, um, we got everything in. Here's, all your stuff is still in the garage. I know you have some things to get out of your house still from upstairs. We've made a clear path from the front door to the back door. You can easily, access everything. And I said, thank you so much for being flexible. If there's anything else I can do, let me know. What? That's how you maintain relationships that you might need. I don't want to antagonize this person, right? And it's the same with your agents. We don't want to antagonize them. They are our allies. They are our best allies, right? They do provide us with opportunity. Do you want to, if you were an agent, would you like to provide opportunity for someone who is gracious and a team player, or someone who complains that they're not getting their fair share or getting enough, right? I think the answer to that is obvious. So at the core of this is to approach them like a team player. Always ask what you can do to help them help you. That is key. What can I do? This is, after all, my career, right? What can I do to help you help me with my career? Because you know things I don't. And that's really at the heart of it. So it's relational, it's kindness, it's team playing. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Thank you for hanging with me and for listening to my moving stories. And of course, as always, if there's anything that I can do for you, send me a message wherever you can find me. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday and a fantastic rest of your week. And I don't think I have any questions here. Nope, no questions. But if you have questions later, just pop them in the comments and I will do my best to get to them. So have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you soon. Ciao.